There are many times in Illustrator when you need to distribute objects over a specific area. Let's take this case for example. I'm using this file called Distributing Objects, which you'll find in the exercise files in Chapter 11. And I have here these several different bodysuits that appear spread out over this area. If I want to distribute these objects evenly, what I can do is select them all, go to the window menu here, choose to open up my Align panel, and you'll notice that on the bottom section over here there's something called Distribute Objects. And I can distribute them by their centers, so now they're all evenly distributed amongst that space. What Illustrator does is it takes the two farmost objects, in this case the one on the far right and the one on the far left, and now simply distributes all of them between that. Now they're already aligned, but just to give you an example, I'm going to press undo. If I have one over here, let's say one here and one here, it won't align the objects, but it will distribute them evenly. So for example, if I now choose that same option, they're distributed evenly, but I would then need to use the align function, for example, to also make them straight. There may be times, however, when you want to distribute things not necessarily by the objects themselves, but you want to focus on the amount of space that exists between each of the objects. Think of the white space between the objects and not the objects themselves. For example, the way my objects fit right now, there's a certain amount of space that is even now between each of these objects. But there may be certain times that I want each object to be exactly a half an inch apart from each other. Using the distribute method that we just specified before, I would need to figure out the exact width of each of these shapes and also calculate the number of shapes that I have, and then space the left and rightmost objects accordingly. Well, that's a lot of work. Instead, we'll do it this way. We'll use a function called distribute spacing. The first thing that I need to do in order to use the distribute spacing command is specify a key object. Now, we used the key object before when we were aligning objects to specify which object we want to align other objects to. Well, when we have distribute spacing, let's for example focus on this one right here. I would need to specify which object stays still, and then all the other objects would then distribute themselves according to that particular position. So the first thing I'll do is I'll come over here to where it says Align To and choose the Align to Key Object setting. Now you'll see over here that this object is currently the key object. Well, I want this one to be the key object, so I'll click on this one. Now that this is defined as the key object, I want each of these objects to have a distribution of exactly a half an inch from that particular object. So I'll specify over here 0.5 inches, and then I'll use this setting here called Horizontal Distribute Space. Now each of these objects are exactly a half an inch apart from each other. So when working with the distribute commands inside of Illustrator, I can either use distribute objects, which means it'll take two outside objects and distribute all objects between them, or I could use distribute spacing using a key object to determine how much white space exists between each object.